Okay, thank you so much for having me. The Econ Society, thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak with students, and as professors, really, it's an honor kind of trying to give you more advice outside the classroom. Well, we're still in the classroom, but outside the lecture, and trying to guide you and offer you some advice on what potential you have with an economics degree and in the real world. And so the lecture today, what I've done is that I've thrown some things together, and it's basically a culmination of my work in consulting. And so in addition to being a professor, I'm also an active consultant and a public policy advocate. So what I want to show you is that the type of work which I do in the real world with different clients, policy groups, government, etc., special interest groups. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to give you an example of the economic models that I use and show you they're actually pretty simplistic but interesting, and kind of conclude on the type of courses you need to take if you want to follow this path. So I think it's pretty nice that I'm coming after JP. JP's work is, again, public policy, but from a different angle. It's with respect to banking and monetary policy and the macroeconomy. Mine's more about microeconomics, right? And so, anyway, without any further ado, let me start. And let me see. Okay, so the title of my talk is Minimum Wage and Booze, Observations from the Real World. So I have about half an hour, or, yeah, okay. So I'll be very quick. So I've done quite a bit of work on the minimum wage, and you've been following the newspapers. The debates really exploded in terms of policy importance. So if you follow the news, the government of Ontario has recently announced an increase in the minimum wage, and that's from $10 to about $11. So while poverty groups are really happy about that, it falls short of the $14 they want. And the debate's not over. We all know an election is coming up, and this is going to be an important policy point for discussion in the election. Okay? So the point being is that how can we contribute as economists? So to give you an example, the government of Ontario commissioned a report. They constructed a panel called the Ontario Minimum Wage Advisory Panel, and it was established in June 2013, and they recently submitted its recommendations in order what a minimum wage should be. So when you think about what a minimum wage is, why do we care about a minimum wage? Well, the minimum wage is basically your minimum you should be paid in a job. And in some cases, and therefore it relates to the concept of equity, fairness, justice, what society should be, what should be the bare minimum a person should be paid for labor. So it's an interesting policy question, right? And the fact that what is a livable wage? And if you think about it, this is not a new insight. Going back to after the Second World War, the United Nations made a declaration that it's a human right having a livable wage. But trying to nail down what a livable wage is really tough. And here's the point. The point being is that when you listen to the political rhetoric, there's a belief that as the minimum wage goes up, that's good because households are better off. They're earning more money. But as economists, we know that's not necessarily true. If you think that labor is a good, like any other good, and the demand curve is downward sloping, if you push the minimum wage up, you're pushing the price of labor up for some occupations. If that's true, if there's a binding effect, what's going to happen is that, sure, some households will be better off, but the ones who keep their jobs. The ones who do not keep their jobs, the ones who are laid off, because that's more cost for business, they're worse off. So in terms of my research, what I'm trying to do is that I'm studying what happens when a minimum wage goes up. Who gets laid off? How many people get laid off? And what I'm more interested in is the unintended consequences. If you think what your key skill as an economist is, it's your ability not to give an obvious effect, but using the simple assumption of rational economic agents that if you have a policy, people might react in a perverse way, and the policy which you think is bettering society is actually in some way making society worse off. Now, what do I mean in this context? Well, think of the minimum wage. If the minimum wage is very generous, then it goes to this point out here that you're basically making dropping out of high school attractive. Okay? If I earn a high wage without having to go to university because it's a high minimum wage, why should I go to university? That means you have a society where you have low levels of human capital accumulation. That's not good, right? Then the possibility is that if you do have a lot of kids, a lot of teens dropping out of high school, not going to university, they might get hooked up, they might get married, they might have families. Having families when you're teens is a very bad idea for a variety of reasons, right? Because such families are more likely to be in poverty forever, okay, not get out of poverty, have kids, and not being able to give a good standard of living to the kids. So that actually leads to more poverty. And that's what my research is all about. And I will get to that. But before I do that, I'm just going to skip through because this is technical stuff. You don't need this. You don't need the literature. I want to get to the main point that when you think of the minimum wage, what is the minimum wage exactly? So if you look at the data out there, you see that over time from the 1980s, the minimum wage in the nominal terms has increased from 1981 to about $3 to $4 to about a bit more than $8. And you see that across all provinces. And you specifically see the large increase in British Columbia over time. But over time, all provinces have basically matched that. And it's the same thing in Eastern Canada. So when you look at the data, almost across all provinces, you see an upward increase in the minimum wage over time. The minimum wage is increasing, no doubt about that. But what we want to know is that who works at the minimum wage. When you look at the data, and this is Statistics Canada data, what you see is that a sizable proportion of minimum wage workers are actually, they are aged 25 to 54. Most of them are teens, but a non-trivial segment of them are adults, older adults also. And interestingly, women account for 60% of all minimum wage workers. If you look at it by industry, agriculture, hospitality, which is basically tourism, the restaurant business, entertainment, they have a significant proportion of minimum wage employees. Okay, so what I do in my research is very simple. It's basic Econ 321, third-year econometrics with a bit of 421, fourth-year econometrics. Nothing more complicated than that. What I do is I use data across provinces and over time. And if you look at Y out there in this equation, it's the employment rate for different segments of the population. And on the right-hand side, you have the minimum wage, and you have other controls. So you run these extremely simple econometric models in trying to understand what the effect of the minimum wage is. Now, so when you think of it from a traditional economic perspective, I'm really interested in this equation where the dependent variable is employment. But my research has basically spanned beyond that. So let me show you this table out here. And I'm just going to blow this up a bit. Okay, so in this table, what I'm showing you are simple estimates of the effect of the minimum wage on employment. And what I'm doing is that I'm breaking up my sample for women and men. And again, nothing fancy, very simple econometrics. The data are by province and by year. And what I'd like you to focus on out here is just this row out here where I backed out the elasticity. Okay? And if you look across the row, you see on average as the elasticity for women employment is about negative 0.3 or negative 0.2. Well, what does that mean? It means on average, as the minimum wage goes up by 10%, employment among women go down by about 3 to 2%. Okay? So there is an effect out there. Now, I want to emphasize this is for women aged 15 to 19. So as the minimum wage goes up, you are basically creating more unemployment among teens, okay, teen women. But how about for men? For men, it's interesting. You see basically the same effect. If you just focus on this row, these are the elasticities, and they range from -2 to -3. Okay? So from a labor supply perspective, this is interesting. Now we know that the minimum wage has a perverse effect. It actually results in more unemployment among teens. But why stop there? And so this is where I really started playing with the data and trying to get an idea of some interesting points. I'm just going to rush through because I don't have much time, but because I want to focus on another topic. So where is it? Okay. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. So in this table, what I'm doing is that I'm looking, it's an econometric model, again, very basic econometrics, and I'm looking at the effect of the minimum wage, but what I'm looking on is I'm looking at the effect of the minimum wage on fertility, right? So this idea that when you have the minimum wage, you have some teens who are laid off, but if some teens are not laid off and they're earning more money, is it correlated with a higher likelihood of family formation? Do they get married? Do they start having kids at a very young age? Something which the minimum wage increase is not intended to do. Okay? But when you run the simple econometric models, what I find actually is that really, again, these are the elasticities, and they're very sizable effects. So if you look at this result out here, which I've highlighted, you see that on average what it means is that as the minimum wage goes up by 10%, that's controlling for everything else, that's correlated with a 5% increase in fertility among 15 to 17-year-olds. That's a huge effect out there. And when you look at 18 to 19-year-olds, that's also an effect, but it's much smaller. So when you think about it, this is a worrisome result. It's a worrisome result because minimum wage is meant to reduce poverty. But if it's encouraging kids to drop out of high school and form families and not continue school, it's only perpetuating poverty, right? So, and as a special regression, what I did is that I took confidential data from Statistics Canada, and I said, well, I'm getting these results, but what I really want to do is I want to estimate the effect of the minimum wage on marriage rates. Because if I get a positive correlation out there, all my results make sense. The fact that I'm getting a significant association between the minimum wage and teen fertility, it'll make sense if I also get a correlation between marriage rates, minimum wage, and marriage rates among teens. And I actually had to go with a colleague and construct marriage rates for teenagers from the data, from the raw data, because CanSim doesn't produce such data. And I found a pretty strong result out there. Okay? So anyway, the point is why I'm showing you these results is that I've been in the press recently talking about the Wynne government's decision to increase minimum wage. And I've been trying to point out that you have to be careful. There are all these accompanying effects which might actually really negate the good stuff which we want to come from a higher minimum wage. Okay? So if you're interested in this type of work, using microeconometrics, running simple models, and looking at the empirical effects of policy, there's a huge demand out there. And I'll get to the type of jobs you can get. But before I do that, some of you might know me from my research on the Ontario liquor market, on the beer store. And that's something which I've got some notoriety on. And so here's a kind of perfect template in 10 minutes. If you want to be an analyst, if you want to be an economist, this is a type of analysis you should enjoy, right? It should be a puzzle, and you should be able to crunch out, okay? And let me just show you this very simply, okay? So we know, can anyone tell me what the retail liquor market in Ontario is. If you talk about the type of market, what model does it fit? JP, you can raise your hand. Okay. Anybody else? The corporations are crown, but what's a structured market? Yeah.
Monopoly.
It's a monopoly. Okay. So it's a monopoly because the LCBO has a monopoly on spirits and wine, basically, and the beer store has a monopoly on beer. Now, the LCBO is a crown corporation. How about the beer store? Yeah, Ro?
Owned by the large brewing company.
Yeah, it's not owned by the government. It's owned by the brewing companies. So the reason being, actually I have no idea how this ever came into being. Well, I do. It is an artifact of the 1920s. So Ontario, as you all know, has very strong Protestant roots, right? And so back in the 1920s, everyone thought prohibition is a very good policy. And so in order to restrict the supply of alcohol going to the market, what happened is that the government decided to set up the beer store and allow it to be controlled by, at that time, many beer retailers. Over the 1960s, they all consolidated, and now we only have 3 major brewers in Ontario, and all owned by foreign firms. But the point is that as an economist, I didn't have to do this research. But what really bugged me is the fact that I'm all for market, and you know what? I actually don't mind monopolies. As long as you have a company which actually builds itself and through innovation offers a superior product, why not? And as long as there are no barriers to entry, why not? That's fine. But the case of the beer store is different because it's protected by legislation. And it really confounds me that you have this retail monopoly which is owned by the private sector, and none of the profits are going to the government, because all the LCBO profits are going to the government. It's a crown corporation. So the question is, quickly, that if the province decides to increase retail competition by allowing grocery stores or convenience stores to sell alcohol, what are the effects? What are the effects on prices? What are the effects of government revenue? Right? When you read the newspapers, that's the main thing. Oh my God, if we let competition enter, what's going to happen is that there's going to be less profits for the LCBO and there's no transfers to the government. That's bad. Very bad. Ooh, okay. If that's the case, why don't we have a monopoly for everything? Have a monopoly grocery store, right? Huge profits, right? And everything can be used for social assistance and everything. Okay. So let's construct a model. So you're now a policy analyst, you're an economist, and you have to make this argument. How do you construct this model? So let's make a simple model. And if you want these slides, I'll forward it to you, right? Because I have to go very quickly. But let's say there's a dominant retailer. And let's say this dominant retailer is like the LCBO and is government owned. And some of these profits of the dominant retailer are going to the government. Now, if convenience stores enter the market, they'll basically charge licensing fees, okay? And these licensing fees are kind of a tax, and some of the revenue of these earned by convenience stores from alcohol sales will then go to the government. Really simple model, and it's basically how much of these systems work. So what's going to happen? What will people do? What will happen is that some consumers will buy their consumption needs from convenience stores, okay? I'll come to which consumers these are. But can you tell me that if, for instance, suddenly you're able to buy wine and beer from Loblaws or from the corner store, would you buy it from there, or would you buy it from the beer store? And as a rational economic agent, what would you be influenced by? And assume, I'm gonna twist it. Yeah, go.
I'll probably buy it from LCBO because 1, it is closer to a native reserve. 2, it has other things I'm probably going to buy anyways, like food, which I haven't tried going without yet.
Well, at the LCBO?
Well, at the Loblaws.
Oh yeah, the law does. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah,
I base my decision on whichever's closer. So
absolutely.
If there's an LCBO closer, I go there. If there's a convenience
Yeah.
store or a drug, or not a drug, like a grocery store closer, I go there.
Absolutely. So assuming there's not much difference in price, you'll go whichever place is closer. Okay, fair enough. So the point being is that there's going to be, if this is true, there's obviously going to be a downward shift in the demand curve for alcohol sold in stores affiliated with the dominant retailer, the LCBO, right? And if we have this kind of very simple, you see that out here. Not a surprise. So that's fair enough. But the point being is that what's going to happen to prices? Before I show you, what do you think is going to happen to prices? Do you think that in equilibrium, the prices charged for the same beer will be the same at the grocery store as in the beer store? Or will there be a difference, and why? What model can predict that? So let's put it this way, that even if the store, there's a convenience store, and it might be a bit closer to you, and maybe the wine is a bit cheaper, would you still perhaps go to the LCBO? Would you be one of them? And if you would go to the LCBO, why would that be the case? Yeah, Rosalie?
Because of the much larger variation in product.
Exactly, exactly. Okay? Product differentiation, that's the point. So the point I'm getting at is that this is part of industrial organization. If you believe in product differentiation, then it's possible to find an equilibrium where the LCBO is charging a lower price than before, but still a higher price than convenience stores. It's the same assumption as, for example, you go and buy gasoline. Okay? You can go to mom and pop's gasoline. It's cheaper, but most people will still will pay a higher price and buy it from Petro-Canada. Right? Maybe because they believe that the product is superior, or there's something about it, or they're collecting points on their card, something. Okay, so that equilibrium is possible. So the point being then is that if that's an equilibrium, what happens to government revenue? Okay, well, the first thing is consumers who still purchase at stores at the LCBO or beer store are better off because prices have gone down a bit, because there are more stores selling alcohol. They're better off. This is cost-benefit analysis, okay, all based on your economics. This is what you have to be able to do. Who's better off? Who's worse off? So consumers who still stick to the LCBO and beer store are better off. Prices have gone down. On the other hand, how about consumers who purchase alcohol from convenience stores? Well, maybe even if prices haven't gone down that much, the alcohol is closer. It's easier for them to get to. So they're better off also. They don't have to travel as much. Okay? So the point being is that who's worse off? Okay, in the short run, the dominant firm, the LCBO or the beer store, is worse off because they're losing sales. But is that it? Is that a short-run effect? Or if you guys are economists, what do you think should happen in the long run? What would an innovative firm do? I'm the beer store, I'm the LCBO, there's entry in the market, these guys are siphoning off my market share. Okay? I'm losing sales. Yeah.
Well, it's going to induce a perfect competition situation, so everybody kind of lowers their prices to try to get.
Do I? But that's the thing. That's a good point. But do I have to? Do I have to lower my price? Or can I do something else to increase my profits? Yes?
Then I'll just exploit the consumer's perception that there's something unique about the store.
Okay.
And then further develop and improve and do marketing and engage in competition and something.
Well, that's good. But when you engage in competition, what does that mean? How can you engage in competition? How can you enhance your profits in this scenario? Yeah? Sorry? Exactly. You minimize costs. You seek efficiencies. So the point being is if that's true, right, what happens is that competition forces, this is what the market is. Competition forces firms to seek efficiencies to reduce marginal cost. And if the LCBO or the beer store, whoever the dominant retailer was, if they succeed in reducing marginal cost, it's possible that they'll go back to earning the same profits they were before deregulation. Okay? So then the province is better off because guess what? They're still getting the same transfer of profits from the LCBO, but they're charging a licensing fee for each liter of alcohol sold by convenience stores. Okay? In fact, when you have competition, government revenue will increase. And this is where your skill also as an economist comes in. What was the market? The market has changed. It's not the same people who were buying alcohol before. There are probably more people buying alcohol now because it's closer to you. Alcohol sales have expanded. So do you see my point? I haven't put any notation. It's simple logic, step by step. This is your skill as an economist. Okay? As a final year undergrad, you should be able to take the Economist or Financial Times, look at a story, and back out the economic models and economics which is going on. If you do that, you're going to succeed at interviews. Okay? So anyway, this is my current research. Very simple. This is exactly how I'm writing it up. And then in terms of the empirics, I actually have some slides where I show that, for example, you look at, this is net per capita income from liquor sales. And if you believe that competition results in more government revenue, the best example is British Columbia, because as British Columbia deregulated the market in 2001, and Manitoba and Saskatchewan is government control. Alberta's been privatized a long time. But look at the breakout here. As soon as you have deregulation in 2001, you have a sharp increase in per capita revenue earned from alcohol sales by the government, right? These are the type of pictures which are compelling to a public policy audience. Okay, nothing more detailed than this. I do a bit of econometrics, but these are the pictures which kind of stick in the public mind. So, kind of in summary, I don't have time to go over the, no, I don't have time to go over this. I guess I'm almost out of time. Yeah, I'm sort of out of time. Okay, last slide. Then I guess I can take some questions. What you need to do if you want to be an economist, right? You have to go to grad school. Everyone has to go to grad school. But it doesn't have to be a master's in economics. There's so much choice out there. There's so many degrees in public policy. There's masters of public service, masters of public policy, masters of public administration. But if you like this sort of stuff, you do need to go to grad school. As an economist, there's only so much the professors can teach you in the class. A lot of it is your own training, your own initiative. As an undergrad, what I used to do is that I did read The Economist very religiously. It's a great magazine. It summarizes contemporary, not only in terms of politics and world affairs, but in terms of contemporary economic thinking. The more you read a magazine like The Economist, the more you start writing and speaking like someone on that team. Communication is key. Someone with communication skills succeeds. Okay? Know your professors, okay? Don't come to your office and say, how's it going? How are you? That type of thing. Okay, don't do that. Come to your office and say, well, I need some advice. Or if you're in my course, that professor, I went through your notes, I got this, but this model I don't agree with, or something I think is wrong, can we go over it? You do that, we remember who you are. And we write a damn good recommendation for you, whether it's in grad school or in terms of job references. Okay? We remember who you are. This is extremely, extremely important. The number of people whom I know who never interact with the professor outside the classrooms, it's just huge. And so the people who actually come and see me when I teach a course, they do benefit. Okay? It is really important, very important. In terms of courses, in this university, I know math is scary. I absolutely agree. I hated math when I was an undergrad. Take Econ 311 as quickly as possible. Once you do that, the other advanced econ courses like micro and macro, especially 401 or 402, become trivial. They become much, much easier. Try to plan your schedule in that way. In terms of your CV, engage with community. Very important to have that on your CV. Okay? In grad school, we don't look upon it that much, but in this school, we sort of do because we have an MA in co-op. Okay? And that matters. Something like this is incredible. The people who have organized these sessions, it's on their CV. It's going to serve them very well. Now, in terms of other points, if you're not in co-op, definitely try to get some experience on your CV. How do you do that? It's easy for me to say that. Go to a professor, volunteer, say that I see your research, I think it's interesting, I'd like to work with you. Okay? You don't have to pay me, but if you give me the experience of working on your research, I would benefit from it. I could put on my CV, something of that sort. These things matter. Okay? You then get experience as a research economist, and that professor will give you, if you do good work, will give you a very good recommendation.